I'm here with the DJI Neo 2, and before we dive into all the incredible features and the not-so-incredible moments, let me make something crystal clear. This is not a sponsored review. DJI sent this in for testing, which I genuinely appreciate, but nobody's paying me to say what I'm about to say. The opinions you're about to hear are raw, honest, and based on weeks of absolutely punishing this drone in every way imaginable. I've crashed it into trees at high speed. I've flown it in near total darkness. I've tested its tracking through dense forest obstacles. I've even launched it in conditions that would make most drone pilots nervous. Why? Because I wanted to know if this drone lives up to the hype, or if it's just another incremental update with fancy marketing. Spoiler alert, it's definitely not incremental. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me walk you through exactly what makes the Neo 2 special, starting with what's actually changed from the original. Design and build evolution. The Neo 2 represents a significant physical redesign, and you can tell DJI actually listened to user feedback from the first generation. It's slightly heavier and has a marginally larger footprint than the Neo 1, but here's what matters. It's considerably slimmer in height, which makes it easier to pack and carry. The new dark gray colorway looks absolutely premium, and it finally matches the accessories properly, which might seem like a small detail, but it shows attention to the complete user experience. What immediately caught my attention was the two-axis gimbal. The original Neo had just a single axis, which meant your footage had this distinctive wobble that screamed budget drone. The Neo 2's two-axis stabilization produces noticeably smoother footage that actually looks professional. The propellers are slightly larger with a completely redesigned shape that I'll talk about more when we get to the noise section, but just know they're part of something special. The new display is a game changer for quick adjustments. You can now control flight mode settings directly on the drone without constantly pulling out your phone or firing up the app. For those spontaneous moment captures, this is absolutely crucial. Up front, there's a proximity sensor for obstacle avoidance. And here's where things get really interesting. In the rear, we've got two small cameras with fisheye lenses providing rear and side collision avoidance. Add in the bottom sensor for position and altitude hold, and you've got a drone that genuinely knows where it is in three-dimensional space. The removable protective cage feels substantially more durable than the original, and believe me, I've tested that durability in ways you probably shouldn't. Camera quality revolution. Let's talk about the elephant in the room with the original Neo. The image quality was fun, but it wasn't exactly impressive. If you were coming from any modern action camera or smartphone, you'd immediately notice the Neo 1 looked soft, struggled with dynamic range, and just didn't have that crisp quality we've come to expect. The Neo 2 changes everything in this department, and I mean everything. The new sensor is legitimately action camera quality. Now, I don't think it quite reaches the Action 5 Pro level, which is DJI's current flagship action camera, but in good daylight conditions, I genuinely struggle to tell the difference between Neo 2 footage and footage from the Action 4. That's remarkable. To put this in perspective, I'd rate the original Neo's quality somewhere around the original DJI Action 1 level, or maybe even slightly below. So, we're talking about jumping forward roughly 3 to 4 generations of action camera sensor technology in a single drone update. For frame rates, you've got serious options now. 4K at 30 frames per second for your standard. Smooth footage. 4K at 60 for that buttery smooth motion. And here's the kicker. 4K at 100 frames per second for slow motion work. That 100 FPS mode opens up creative possibilities that simply didn't exist with the Neo 1. You can capture fast action and slow it down to emphasize moments, add drama to your shots, or just make your footage look more cinematic. But what really impressed me was the low light performance. The Neo 1 was basically unusable after sunset. I tried multiple times to get side-by-side comparisons in dim lighting, and the Neo 1 either refused to take off entirely or would take off and then drift aimlessly until it bumped into something. It had no spatial awareness in low light. The Neo 2 can fly and track with dramatically less available light. I took it out to a really dark area at night, the kind of darkness where your phone camera struggles, and it followed me perfectly, maintaining tracking as if it were broad daylight. I even tested it in an extremely dark spot, and it still followed me just like normal, as if it were daytime. That's not just an improvement. That's a fundamental capability that didn't exist before. For those curious about comparisons, I also tested it against the Hover Air X1 Pro Max in low light, and the difference in capability is significant. Tracking revolution. Now we're getting to the part that genuinely blew my mind, and I want you to pay close attention here, because this is where the Neo 2 separates itself from literally everything else in this price category. The tracking capabilities aren't just better, they're operating on a completely different level. The Neo 1 could follow you walking, running, cycling, all the basic stuff, and from behind, it actually did a decent job. But the moment you wanted front tracking or side tracking, things fell apart fast. In front follow mode, the Neo 1 would swing out to the side within seconds, completely ruining the shot you were trying to capture. In side follow, it would consistently fall back to a diagonal rear position, never maintaining that true side angle that makes tracking footage dynamic and interesting. The Neo 2 fixes all of this, and then adds capabilities I honestly didn't think were possible at this size and price point. Rear tracking is even more locked in now, and it can maintain tracking at speeds up to 43 kilometers per hour, which is roughly 27 miles per hour. That's fast enough for most cycling, running, and even some casual skateboarding or skiing. The drone is genuinely more agile, more responsive, and keeps you centered in frame with impressive consistency. But here's what really matters. Front and side tracking actually work now, like properly work. I tested this extensively because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'd walk toward the drone, and it would smoothly fly backward, maintaining distance and keeping me perfectly framed. I'd run alongside it, and it would match my pace laterally without falling behind. This opens up shot variety that makes your content actually interesting to watch, instead of just being another follow me from behind vlog. The secret sauce here is the sensor array I mentioned earlier. With the front proximity sensor, the two rear fisheye cameras, and the bottom sensor, this drone has genuine spatial awareness. It's not just tracking you, it's simultaneously mapping the environment around it, calculating positions and distances of objects, and making real-time decisions about how to navigate while keeping you in frame. I genuinely believe it's sampling and analyzing environmental data dozens of times per second, maybe even hundreds of times, to pull this off. I tested it in scenarios where I fully expected it to fail. There's this gap between two trees on my usual trail that's maybe 4 feet wide. I didn't think the Neo 2 would attempt to go through it while tracking me, and when it did, I assumed it was just a lucky accident. So I turned around, came back from the other direction, and watched it successfully navigate through that same gap again. That's not luck, that's intelligent obstacle avoidance working in real time. Obstacle avoidance in action. The obstacle avoidance deserves its own discussion because it's genuinely impressive technology when you see it working in real-world conditions. When the Neo 2 approaches an obstacle while tracking you, it doesn't just stop or crash, it actually problem solves. It'll attempt to go around the obstacle. If that's not possible, it'll try going over it. If that doesn't work, it'll attempt to go under it. It's making these decisions autonomously while simultaneously maintaining your tracking lock. I've got footage of it navigating around trees in real time, smoothly adjusting its path to maintain line of sight with me while avoiding collision. I tested it through gaps between trees that I honestly didn't think it would make it through. The first time it succeeded, I thought maybe it was just luck, but then it came back from the other side and navigated through again. That kind of intelligent navigation is what you'd expect from drones costing 3 or 4 times as much. Now, because the collision avoidance is so effective, it actually made my durability testing harder to conduct. I kept trying to crash this thing for testing purposes, and it kept refusing to cooperate. There's one clip where it almost crashed, but just kind of paused and then carried on its way. I kept trying to steer it into a tree, and it just kept avoiding obstacles. Finally, it didn't see a branch on time, and that took it down. Here's an important real-world scenario, though. I forgot to turn the avoidance sensors back on after disabling them earlier with the RC2 that morning, and the drone crashed into a tree at pretty high speed. It fell from approximately 15 feet onto hard ground. I was certain something had to be broken. When I picked it up and inspected it, there was 0 damage. Not a crack, not a scratch, nothing. The protective cage did exactly what it was designed to do. The really big crash came shortly after that incident. I believe I turned the sensors back on after hitting that tree, and I was testing the side tracking at a fairly high speed when there was a pretty big impact. The only damage was the clear plastic display cover popping off. I found it in the grass, snapped it back on, gave the drone a quick clean, and it was absolutely perfect. No lasting damage whatsoever, and you genuinely couldn't tell it had just experienced a serious crash. The Neo 1 was pretty durable too, but the plastic on mine did break during a much less intense impact, so the Neo 2 seems quite a bit more durable overall. The lake incident. Alright, let's talk about the moment that nearly broke my heart and definitely made me question my testing methodology. The Neo 1 was frankly too unreliable to use around water with my kayak. The tracking wasn't good enough, and I didn't trust it not to just drift off into the lake randomly, But the Neo2's improved tracking gave me confidence to actually try kayaking footage. And I have to say, before everything went wrong, it was absolutely brilliant for this purpose. The drone followed my kayak around the lake with impressive precision, maintaining smooth footage while I paddled, adjusting altitude to get different angles, navigating around overhanging tree branches near the shore. I was genuinely excited about the footage I was capturing. Unfortunately, you're never going to see any of that footage, and here's why. After about 15 minutes of following me around, I decided it was time to land the Neo2 and head back to shore. My kayak was drifting slightly in the wind, not dramatically, but enough that I knew trying to hand-land the drone while sitting in an unstable kayak was probably risky. So I made what seemed like a smart decision. I'd use the app to bring the drone down into a low hover, maybe 2 or 3 feet off the water, then paddle over and simply grab it out of the air. Easy, right? Here's what I didn't account for. The Neo2 has an automatic landing sequence that triggers when it gets within a certain distance of what it perceives to be the ground. In this case, it was reading the water surface as ground. So as I lowered the altitude through the app, the drone suddenly decided it was landing time and initiated the auto-landing protocol. I frantically tried to abort the landing, jabbing at my phone screen, but the drone had made its decision. I watched in slow-motion horror as it descended those final few feet and touched down on the water's surface. For about half a second, it just sat there floating, propellers still spinning, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could paddle over fast enough to grab it. Then it tipped sideways. Water rushed into the electronics, the propellers stopped, and it sank, just gone, straight down into the murky lake water that was probably 8 or 9 feet deep at that point. I sat there in my kayak, staring at the spot where it disappeared, feeling absolutely gutted. Now, I want to be completely clear about something. This was not the Neo2's fault. This was entirely my mistake. I should have researched whether there was a way to disable auto-landing for water scenarios. I should have just landed it on the shore first. I made a bad decision, and I paid the price for it. But here's what I think could genuinely help prevent this situation for others: a dedicated water or kayak mode. If DJI could add a setting that, when enabled, disables automatic landing entirely, users could manually control the altitude all the way down to inches above the water, let it hover there stably, and then safely grab it. That would make watercraft usage significantly safer. When I got home, disappointed and honestly a bit embarrassed, I reached out to my contact at DJI and explained what happened. I want to give a genuine thank you to that person, because they helped me get a replacement unit so I could actually finish this review properly. Without their assistance, this video wouldn't exist, and I'm truly grateful for that support. It's worth noting that this wasn't some special treatment. They were just genuinely helpful when I explained the situation honestly. Gesture control breakthrough. Now let's shift gears to something that genuinely feels like future technology: the gesture control system. I've always wanted to move objects with my mind like Luke Skywalker, and while this isn't exactly force powers, it's probably the closest I'm going to get in my lifetime. The gesture controls on the Neo2 work so intuitively and reliably that once you've experienced them, going back to manual controller, positioning feels archaic. Here's the magic. You can reposition the drone to get exactly the shot you want without touching a controller or even pulling out your phone. Just use your hand. Move your hand to direct where you want it to go, and it responds. Want it higher? Raise your hand. Want it to circle around to your left? Use hand gestures, and it smoothly moves to that position. It sounds simple, but the implementation is flawless, and the creative freedom this unlocks is substantial. This becomes especially powerful when you're already in a tracking mode. Let's say the drone is following you from behind as you walk through a park. Suddenly you approach a really scenic area and you want to capture it from the front instead. With traditional drones, you'd need to stop, pull out your controller or phone, change the flight mode, relaunch, and hope you haven't lost the moment. With the Neo2, you just hold your hand out and use gestures to swing it around to the front or side to get footage from another angle, and within seconds it's repositioned and capturing that front-facing angle. And once you're done, just hold your hand out and it immediately flies back and lands on your palm. It's exactly like having that little pet flying orb I imagined the future would have when I was a kid watching science fiction movies. The fact that this technology actually exists now, works reliably, and costs under $400 is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. The gesture recognition is fast, accurate, and works in various lighting conditions. And the best part? It works when you're walking too. You can be on the move, have it following you, then use your hand to reposition it without ever having to stop or land the drone to change modes. Quickshots and audio innovation. Beyond the gesture controls, the Neo2 comes loaded with various quickshot modes that add creative variety to your content. Some of these are just fun to play with, like the Hitchcock effect or the dolly zoom, that vertigo-inducing perspective shift you've seen in movies. There are a few other creative modes as well. Others are genuinely useful for establishing shots, like the boomerang mode that flies out, shows off your surroundings, and then comes back. Great for giving viewers a sense of where you are. My personal favorite is the circle mode, which creates those smooth orbital shots that make your subject look dramatic and cinematic. The photo capabilities are surprisingly robust, too. You can take quick selfies by just pressing the button. The drone launches, flies out to your pre-chosen distance, takes a photo or a sequence of photos if you want, and then flies directly back to your hand. The whole process takes maybe 10 to 15 seconds, which makes it genuinely practical for casual use rather than just being a gimmick. Now let's talk about audio, because DJI has implemented something really clever here. You can use the Mic Mini accessory, which connects to your phone, and the app will record your voice, combine it with the video, and then use AI processing, what they call AI sprite trickery, to remove the sound of the propellers. It works shockingly well, especially with the Mic Mini. You end up with footage that sounds like you recorded it with a traditional camera on a gimbal rather than a flying drone with spinning propellers inches from the microphone. In the default mode, it tries to keep environmental sounds as well as your voice, and just removes the propeller sounds. There's even a pure voice mode where it strips out everything except your voice. All environmental noise, all propeller sounds, everything. Instead of just getting rid of the propeller sounds, it also gets rid of the environment noises, so you just end up with your voice. This is perfect for vlogs where you want clean vocal narration without any background distraction. The fact that this level of audio processing is happening in real time through a mobile app is genuinely impressive technology. Remote mass flight modes and battery. Speaking of propeller sounds, the Neo2 is dramatically quieter than its predecessor, and I believe most of this improvement comes down to the redesigned propellers. Those unusually shaped tips I mentioned earlier are similar to aftermarket low-noise props designed for larger drones. But I've never seen this exact design before. When you compare the Neo2 flying next to the Neo1, the difference is immediately obvious. The Neo2 produces a lower pitch sound at reduced volume, which is less annoying to you and less likely to disturb people around you. It's much quieter and the pitch is lower. For flight options, you've got serious versatility. You can use your phone as a basic remote, and now you finally have return-to-home functionality, even without a dedicated controller. You can use the RCN3 transmitter with your phone and fly it like a proper camera drone with full manual control. Or you can use the RC2, which is what I tested most extensively. The transmission range and signal strength have been upgraded significantly. DJI claims 20 kilometers of range, which I can't fully test because battery life becomes the limiting factor, but I can confirm the signal is noticeably stronger over longer distances compared to the Neo1. This improvement is partly thanks to the new transceiver module that comes with the Fly More combo and the Motion Fly More combo. It connects to the back of the remote and features better antennas. I also suspect that having it physically separated from the remote's internal components reduces interference, though that's just educated speculation. One thing I noticed immediately is how fast this drone acquires satellites. By the time my remote finishes booting up, the drone already has enough satellite lock to take off safely. That's faster than any of my other drones. You can also fly the Neo2 in FPV mode using the goggles and the FPV controller, or the motion controller, which unlocks the drone's true speed potential, well, over 50 kilometers per hour. I'm still a beginner at FPV, and the weather isn't exactly ideal for this kind of flying at the moment, but I'm loving the performance increase over the Neo1. For battery performance, I got just over 13 minutes in my indoor hover test under controlled conditions. In my outdoor test, flying gently in normal mode until it began a forced landing, I achieved just over 11 minutes. That's respectable for a drone this size. I just genuinely love what DJI has accomplished here. It's the kind of product that makes you excited about where consumer drone technology is heading. It's my favorite tech release of 2025, and that's pretty significant to me. I've got several more Neo2 videos coming in the next few days, including direct head-to-head comparisons with the Neo1 and the Hover Air X1 Pro Max, plus more tracking tests. One of those is actually coming later today. If you want to see whether the Neo2 actually lives up to the hype in those comparisons, you absolutely need to subscribe right now so you don't miss those videos. If you found this review useful or interesting, I'd very much appreciate a thumbs up. It genuinely helps the algorithm remember that my tiny channel exists. Drop a comment below telling me what drone features matter most to you, or if you have specific questions about the Neo2 that I didn't cover here. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.